introduce my colleague, Representative Scribner, who is the ranking member of the Transportation Committee. And to be quite honest with you, it was his idea to have this forum in regards to getting people together to have a better understanding and a dialogue amongst towns in regards to tolls, electronic tolls that might be coming on borders of the towns, and to have an open discussion in regards to what are the pros and cons of having this.
The idea behind this was to provide an opportunity for members of the public in the Danbury region what kind of information the legislature has before it and what kind of facts we're looking at in regard to the potential of re-implementing tolls in the state of Connecticut. This is an issue that could potentially have impacts statewide. So we believe that rather than hold, we did have a subject matter public hearing earlier this month in the Transportation Committee. And interestingly enough, we did not have a significant number of people from the public attend that, but we also recognize that that's very difficult for many members of the public. So our idea was to bring it out to you and provide an opportunity with some of our knowledgeable people in regard to what may be considered in the future. And just so that you know, the Transportation Committee has ended its business for this session. We did not pass any legislation that is going to move tolls forward. What we have done is to request that the Department of Transportation do an evaluation. We've recently completed a very thorough study and gotten that information back, so we've asked the department to do that evaluation and bring their recommendations back to us by June of next year, which by that time next year, we won't be in session. So there won't be anything potentially before us to consider for probably 2 more years. At least that's the way that I see it. I wanted to start out by just giving you a little bit of brief history about tolls in Connecticut. After a horrific crash in 1983 in Stratford on 995, which killed 7, the state legislature made a conscious decision for public safety reasons and for good reasons, to eliminate all tolls in the state of Connecticut. I would tell you that I think that was a wise decision. Obviously, it affected the state of Connecticut in a detrimental way as far as the source of revenue. And at that time, the state of Connecticut replaced that source of revenue by implementing a gross receipts tax, which then funds the transportation fund here in the state. There are other issues of concern that have been raised by members of the public, and they're very obvious to many. A disproportionate burden on commuters and we have many of them here in the state of Connecticut, who commute outside the state on a daily basis. There's concern about the waste of precious motor vehicle fuel, if there is congestion caused by tolls, the obvious creation of safety hazards. But I think one of the ones that most people don't realize, and I think it's an important factor in any consideration of tolling, is that we get rewarded by the federal government for having made the conscious and responsible decision to eliminate tolls because of the safety hazard. And right now, part of the reason that we get the level of federal funding that we do, and 80% of all of our infrastructure projects here in the state are subsidized by the federal government, is because we don't have tolls. And when I say that, I say this piece of information. I think it's important to realize that. We actually eliminated 8 toll stations on 995 and Route 52, and subsequently in 1986, the closing of all the tolls on Merritt and Wilberforce Parkways. In 1978, Congress added a provision to the federal law that allowed segments of toll roads that were part of the interstate highway system to qualify for funding, which Connecticut took full advantage of. In 2008, the legislature provided funding to hire a consultant to conduct the toll and congestion pricing study and provide analysis on several alternatives. In February of 2009, the Transportation Strategy Board introduced a draft copy of the study. A summary of that report is provided to the audience as handouts, and Jill Kelly will talk more about that study and its findings. Following the results of the study, the Transportation Committee held a public hearing that I referred to earlier in late February, and the top tolls and congestion pricing, during which we had testimony from a variety of interests and experts. On March 13th, the Transportation Committee passed Senate Bill 445, which further required DOT and budgetary resources to analyze by June 2010 the implementation of tolls in Connecticut. While electronic tolling is in the future and helps maintain speed at tolling facilities, we will still need conventional toll booths for drivers who don't have electronic transponders. If operated by the state, there would be added costs associated with wages and benefits for staffing those booths. There are certainly safety concerns traveling at 65 miles an hour and having to come to a sudden stop. Depending on the toll levels, diversion rates could range from 5.29% to 21.28%. And it's estimated that 13,800 vehicles on a daily basis would be potentially diverted during peak hours, particularly commuter time, onto local or other state roads. That, I believe, is a very significant concern to this area. Most of our commuters that travel out of the Danbury region do so going towards New York State on 84 to 684. There are lots of opportunities for them to get off 684 or Route 22 north of that by traveling on roads like Route 35, Route 6, Route 202, taking them through residential areas. We already have a problem like that here in this region when from time to time we have the way station open and truckers are aware of that and wind up meandering through residential streets in the area, which really is not only a nuisance but a potential safety hazard. Those are things that we have to consider. And when I say that, I think we have to consider all benefits and all potential effects and impacts that it would have, not to mention the economic impact that it has to individuals, and in this area also to businesses. We have one of the largest malls in New England located here, right off of 84, close to the New York State border in Danbury. Many people from bordering states travel into Connecticut to make purchases, and it's not only isolated to the mall. There's lots of retail businesses that benefit from people purchasing that live out of state because of the close proximity, and there is a potential that that stream would be affected.
We did have some public hearing in regards to the tolls, and the TSB had their meetings with the Cambridge report. And what we're looking at is that we need to start looking at other revenues. It is my feeling, ladies and gentlemen, that we cannot rely on a gas tax. The future of our automobiles in the next 5 or 6 years will be getting 50, 60, even 70 miles per gallon. There is a possibility instead of going to fill up your tank, you're going to be plugging your cars in. So when the Cambridge report came out and talked about border tolls, we felt as though that was the most reasonable tolling system in regards for the DOT to look at and for the state of Connecticut to look at. Now, if this should ever happen, one hand has to follow the other. And that would be that if we're going to have tolls, that means we need to reduce the gas tax. It was my understanding that if we reduce the gas tax, it would go at 50%. And then subsequently, years after that, bring it down to another 25%, which would allow 25% of the gas tax in the state of Connecticut. Now, to me, I think that's a good idea. Now, there are other people, obviously, that have some concerns on the borders, and that is why I'm here. I do want to hear some of the concerns. What are the problems that maybe I'm not seeing? Because, to be quite honest with you, I don't live on the towns that border Massachusetts or New York. I live right in the middle of Rocky Hill, which would not be affected quite as much as Senator Boucher represents Scrivener's district. But we need to know that. Because if we're going to move forward with this, or not move forward, we need to have all information in place. And I think this is a good outlet for us to come out and meet with individuals like yourselves, because unfortunately, you do all the work, and you can't go up to the Capitol during testimony to voice your concerns. And maybe this is a start for us to maybe start hitting other communities to find out what their concerns are. But again, this is something now, I want everyone to be very clear though, is that we're not talking about the old toll booths back in the 80s. We're talking about electronic tolling, which is basically a bar that would go over the highway that would send a signal to maybe a transpondent on your dash or on your license plate, and basically you would get billed for that by month. Now, some people may think that I'm thinking too far into the future, but I do believe within the next 5 years that our automobiles will have automatic transponders on their vehicles, which would allow you to go through any state and basically send a signal that if you're going through New York, it's this much, if you're going through Connecticut, it's this much, and if you're going through Massachusetts, this much. We've seen the technology come so far. We just passed a cell phone bill a few years back saying that no one can use their cell phones. And at that time I said, there will be a day where you'll be talking to your car in regards to making phone calls, and that day has come. Ford has introduced vehicles of that, and Mercedes and Lexus all have that now. So, I mean, we have to start thinking outside the box here, that we cannot rely solely on the gas tax. And if we do collect revenues from tolls, it would be hopefully under the guidance of the Transportation Committee that money goes back to the infrastructure of our roads and be used for mass transit. Now, there's going to be some dilemmas in regards if you do toll, and Charlie's here and the commissioners here to talk about whether we can use that money to be allocated for mass transit. Well, if we can't use that money to be allocated for mass transit, then maybe some of the gas tax that we still have there at 25% can be used for our rails and for our buses to get our rail system underway here. So again, this is a good start. I think it's important that we open up the dialogue to understand the concerns that you all have in your area here, and by all means, as Representative Scribner say, I would love to see something happen by 2010, but realistically, you know, being in the legislature for 10 years, this is a complicated issue. And it's an important issue, and I don't think we should just jump into it, you know, without thinking of all the consequences or the concerns that our public has.
I can tell you that my constituents are a very hard sell on the issue of reinstituting tolling, but there's no question that we're entering an era of an economic imperative when it's our responsibility to study and examine all possibilities, especially as the ground is shifting under us both in technology and in revenue sources. In fact, the good chairman did mention that the car technology is changing, and I'm an example of that is having a small Honda Fit outside that's getting nearly 40 miles per gallon. And when he brought this to my attention, he was right. I'm paying probably at the end of this year, probably half of the taxes that I might have paid the year before. So the state would be losing, if a number of us went this direction, quite a bit of revenue, and that shortfall needs to be met if we're going to improve the rail system that I and you all are so passionately supportive of. So again, thank you for being here. I'm very, very interested in hearing from you.
I live on the border of, I live in New Fairfield. I live on the border of Danbury and Worcester, New York. And I can tell you firsthand, I knew every single time the exit 2-way station was open because the tractor trailers were driving right by my house. I knew during Iraqi freedom, they were driving by my house at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and there was nothing worse than listening to a tractor trailer drive by your house and downshift at 2, 3, or 4 o'clock in the morning. It wakes you up out of a sound sleep. It also scares me to think how fast they're going, because they were not going slow. And that road is extremely narrow and winding. At one time, a neighbor of mine was driving in the opposite direction towards New York State on Milltown Road and said she thought this tractor trailer was going to hit her head on. And she had 2 of her children in the car with her. She was that frightened. It's a scary thing They will use that road if we have a toll booth there. There is no question in my mind that they will be using that road and other roads in our area, because that's just the nature of the beast. They don't want to pay, the truck drivers don't want to stop to have their trucks weighed, because God knows what they're carrying and they're probably overweight. But they also are not going to stop to pay a toll. I know it. I can tell because I've seen it firsthand. So my 2 cents is that I don't want any tolls on the borders in Danbury. Okay?
I'm Jim Dyer. I'm former member of the House of Representatives and also a board-term mayor of the city of Danbury. I was the mayor when we decided that the mall was a good thing for the city of Danbury, that it would be a great economic anchor for the city of Danbury. One of the factors we looked at when we were recording the mall, as opposed to putting it in Brookfield or southeast New York, where those 2 sites were considered, was a $300 million retail loss in sales to areas mostly in New York State. So it made good economic sense to bring the mall. I can't imagine what that would be in today's dollars. So we wouldn't want to do anything to detract from the revenue to the mall, the sales tax revenue to the state of Connecticut, not to mention the property tax and the jobs to the city of Danbury. Anything that would impede that development, that growth, that economic stability would be a negative, in my opinion. Now let me tell the other side of it. For 15 years, I've been in Newark, New Jersey, down the Garden State Parkway and across the Tappan Zee. I saw all the various incarnations of Easy Pass. And believe me, New Jersey did not have it right at the start. All the lane switching, the signage was horrible. Not everyone bought into Easy Pass. I did. I thought it was great. Just drive through. When they put the high-speed lanes in, that made it much more palatable because you didn't have to stop at all. You could just fly through at 60, 70, whatever. But there were still people who did not participate, still people who would lose their way approaching the toll booths. So if you ever do this, I would suggest talking to New Jersey and see what their experience was to get it right if you do it, because there was a lot of confusion at first, and a lot of accidents too. But I oppose it because I live on the border town. I think it will seriously impact the economic development of the city of Danbury. I further think it will seriously impact all these side streets, one of them I live on. So I see all the trailer trucks avoiding the way station going over Manhattan Road now. That's not to say there couldn't be more local enforcement there.
Yeah, I gotta give it to them.
So proceed with caution. I know you will. I've been part of that process. I know there'll be all kinds of arguments going back and forth on both sides of the aisle. But let's not just make it a revenue issue, because right now that's all anyone's talking about is revenue. The governor's talking about cutting spending, which isn't a half-bad idea. It may not be as simple as we want it to be. And of course, nobody wants their program impacted. So anyway, that's my approach from the economic standpoint of the city of Danbury and the planning we made when we brought them all here. 84 never had tolls. I-95 and the Merritt did. So I'm not so sure I-95 is, put them there. 84 just isn't laid out to have tolls, unless you put it over near Waterbury.
Well, thank you for coming today. It was very interesting to sit through this. I am the senior property manager for the Danbury Fair Mall, and I really appreciate everyone's comments here. You know, we certainly are in opposition of the tolling. The property generates approximately 40% of its business from the New York border markets. And not just Danbury Fair Mall, all of our retailers in this greater Danbury area. I mean, all of us talk, and a lot of our business is really brought in from that New York border. We consider it a dual market. That's how we promote ourselves. And so I think that just Danbury and its location and why we all selected to come here. So many businesses, and not just retail, but a lot of businesses. We attract a lot of workers and a lot of retail from those neighboring borders. So I thank everyone for their comments, and certainly we're in agreement. Thank you.
Brian Whalen. I'm a Danbury, Connecticut resident. I've been here quite a while, since '82. My take on this whole thing is, well, let me try to do it one by one. Representative Scribner brought up a good point. So you're going to look at both the benefits and the negative side. I think it was, I'm not sure what that term was, but any of the negative side of the whole thing, the whole idea about putting up tolls. And I'm not just looking at Danbury, I'm thinking about the whole state.
It is state.
I agree with everybody in here, all their arguments about Danbury. This is definitely a bad idea. But for 14 years, I traveled down to Norwalk, and I was the safety director for a trucking company down there. It used to be Valerie's, who now had a business. Who were in business for about 50 some odd years before they ended up going down. We ran 200 trucks on the road every day, and this was back when we did have the tolls down in Stamford. As a matter of fact, when they opened up the new way station down there, that old way station was a brand new one. It's a Class A way station. I was there for the opening as part of Motor Transport, one of the members of Connecticut Motor Transport. Terrific revenue, yes. Do we need the revenue? Absolutely. Would I like to get the revenue from other states? Sure. But as you say, you're going to lose some of that, I think. Now, on the safety part, the biggest thing is benefits, yes. We get the income. That's the benefit. That's the only thing I can see is the revenue. And as you, Mr. Guerra, said, it sure would be nice to get the outsiders to pay into our revenue. I totally agree with that. How we're going to do that, I don't know, but I don't think tolls is the answer. On the negative side, I had to pick out safety first because that's my career type thing, and I saw awful lot of accidents, awful lot of holdups. And I don't care if you have an electronic thing or not, sensor type thing. On 84 here, or in, as most of you know, down on 95 going through Stamford, I don't care what kind of sensor you have, that's not going to slow up the traffic. Or it's not going to speed up the traffic, I should say. You come down here on 84 and go over to, I used to get out of White Plains Airport all the time, or over to Stewart to the airport there, a little closer than Brad. I'd rather do that, but anyway. You're stopped dead in the morning when you're trying to get to the airport. And if you're coming across from New York, I went up to Cheshire for the last 10 years. I've been working in Cheshire for Connecticut, insurance company up in Cheshire as a safety consultant. And I saw more New York plates than anything else. So you do get a lot of traffic, and I wonder how many of those are going to go find someplace else to work or shop or whatever when they start adding this kind of cost to their daily drive. Longer travel time. I was looking at the business interruption, but everybody else brought that up. You mentioned the possibility of lowering the gas tax down to 50% maybe, and maybe later on down another 25%. But the gas tax was what took the place of the tolls in the first place. So that money was supposed to go towards the infrastructure and maintenance and everything towards the road. Why isn't it? Is it going to the general fund, or is it really being dedicated towards the maintenance and everything on the roads?
Go to the general fund.
You may be able to see that. Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't belong in the general fund, just like with Social Security, what the feds did. They put it in a general fund. It's not going to Social Security. That's why they're broke. Well, it could be the same problem with the tax money.
Lord knows, I don't envy you guys trying to produce the revenue you have to do it, and Lord knows you're going to find a way to get it from us, unfortunately, whether it be the gas tax or whatever. But I do think the gas tax is fair, regardless of whether a car gets 100 miles a gallon or using hydrogen. You can find an equitable way to adjust the tax. We're used to fluctuating gas prices, so I think that's the most equitable way. I have a personal stake. I live on Route 39, and I concur with this young lady's impact on Milltown Road. I see the trucks come by when the way stations open. I'm originally from New Jersey. I'm well aware of the Jersey Turnpike. I work for an engineering firm that the liaison to the Jersey Turnpike and Garden State Parkway. So I understand that infrastructure and requirements required to implement those things. There's a huge administrative administrative impact that needs to be taken, whether you have those tolls or not. There's a lot of people that don't want Easy Pass just because of the privacy issue with government. I have one. I don't have a problem, but you have all these issues. The safety is a huge one. I don't know what the cost-benefit ratio is. If we have tolls, what do we lose in federal highway funds? I haven't seen that in this report here. Obviously, there's a push for mass transportation. I don't know if this is an impetus in order to get people to use mass transportation, but I think it's a little backwards to try to implement tolls when we should probably be investing in the tools and technologies for mass transportation so that we as a society get more used to using that. And I totally respect the DOT members. Being a building contractor myself, and with all due respect, I think DOT personnel is one of the least productive personnel I observe anywhere in the state. And I apologize, I don't take affront to anybody personally, but I don't think they do the best job in the world as far as productivity goes. And that would just be more DOT personnel. So anyway, I thank you again for being here. I concur with all the comments that were made, and I don't think it's polls here with Danbury is a good idea. Thank you.